This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I can't be protected by hopes and prayers.
I won't use hope towards what's next. I'll make my own way.
I know impossible is an opinion.
I won't wait for safer schools. I want to create them.
I don't want to be afraid anymore.
I refuse to be a victim.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
to bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
So, Ross, thank you so much for taking the time to interview with ZeroNow today. I'm very excited for our conversation. So I know that you are the co-founder of Protect Students Abroad, and I would just love to hear a little bit about why you started this organization.
Yeah, so in 2012, my son went to study abroad with, he was a Swarthmore College student studying abroad through Duke University, an organization for tropical studies. We didn't know the relationship because our tuition went to his home school, which was Swarthmore College. We learned in the aftermath and how the dollars are split up between Duke University and a third-party program, which is called Organization for Tropical Studies. 4 months, the program was in Costa Rica. He was studying global health and tropical medicine. We had done every bit of research. He was diligent in his research and speaking with former alumni, and I, on the other hand, did a whole lot of research on the country itself and looking at the itinerary, because my son was going to be there for 4 months studying global health and tropical medicine, living at the botanical station and traveling with the professors and living at the botanical stations together with the professors. And so, looking at the itinerary, there was no beach trip or anything on there. We researched every possible thing that we thought we could, going to the extent of buying a snake boot, because on our own we learned they have 27 of the deadliest kind of snakes. Having come from the tropical country as a little child, I'm familiar with snakes and things like that, and so to learn there was 27 different type of snakes. We went the extra measure and talking to the program, and they're telling me that a $15 rubber boot will be fine. This is the viper. The viper, 27 different type of vipers. I mean, you're going to be in the jungle. Hospitals are not going to be closed. My common sense is telling me this. Nothing in the documents told me this. So we chatted back and forth, and then I ended up buying a snake boot that cost me $400. 2 days prior to coming home, the program surprised them with a beach trip. We learned in the aftermath it was one of the deadliest beach in Costa Rica because of the 6 rivers that empty into it. One of them is the largest in Costa Rica. And he was standing in less than knee deep water with another student, and the other student who survived said it felt like the earth fell out from underneath their feet, and she gave up because she couldn't fight any longer. She thought she was going to die. But amazingly, she tumbled out in the waves and somebody was able to grab her. The professors were sunbathing 1,000 feet up the beach. They didn't even know what was going on. The couple who was walking on the beach, who saw it, was screaming out, "Who are these students?" And the professors told us they thought it was kids playing on the beach that was making noise, so they continued to sunbathe. Ravi struggled in the water for just about 45 minutes until he went under, and then we got a call from Organization for Tropical Studies saying our son was missing, not that it was a beach trip, not that he had drowned, not that they had watched him go under the water. And I felt like we were led on a wild goose chase, because when they called, they said he was missing. We booked the flight, went down, and a couple of weeks after we came back, we searched for 2 days and with the Red Cross, and we ended up finding Robbie's body, and we couldn't bring him home. because he had been in the water for 2 days. And so we ended up having to have the service in Costa Rica and brought back the ashes. A few weeks later, we were at Swarthmore, his home school, where our middle son also went to school, and we were attending his graduation. And we had a meeting with the president of the college at the time, and she was sitting there and she said, I have no clue how, I don't understand how they decided to make a decision to take the students to the deadliest beach. It was the first time we were hearing this. And so after my son's graduation, we came back home and, I wasn't sleeping. I wanted answers. I had many questions. The program's lawyered up and they don't have to talk to you because they say, you talk through the lawyers, and answers and responses was very minimal. And, I kept questioning myself. How did we not know? I thought Robbie was study abroad first. How, how did I not know about the beach trip? Why didn't they notify us? They were taking the students into Panama at one point doing the research that they had to do, and we had to sign a separate document for that. But when it was the beach trip, they didn't have us sign a separate document. And because I wanted answers, I took to the internet and I did study abroad student death, because I was thinking Ravi was the first, and I had no idea what I was going to find or what I was going to do with the information. And I found a bunch of links, but I kept going page by page, and I couldn't close the computer because I don't know how many pages there are. And so night and day, I opened every link on those pages, and whenever I saw it was a student, I cut and paste a link and send it in the email to myself. And when I get to about 15 links on a page, I'd send the email to myself. And eventually I got to 85 pages of on that one search string and went through every single link. And about a year later, I found, it was during those searches, I found Elizabeth, who also became my co-founder. She, her son had died the year before, so he was one of the students that the news picked up and carried in the newspaper, which is how I was finding students who were injured and raped and mugged and killed and died. It was through sometimes obituary, sometimes a newspaper article, sometimes a little blurb that the college may publish. And it was through that I found Elizabeth. And about a year later, I was going out to Minnesota to meet Elizabeth. And I thought, let me print. I started to print those pages because I wanted, I had also reached out to officials, government officials, asking what measures there are to protect students when they go abroad. Because I'm paying $23,000 of my tuition to a college in the United States. My child should have some kind of protection. And I started to reach out to my local officials and in New York, and then eventually the federal, because everyone I talked to had never heard of these issues. And I got to the New York Senate, and they were like, well, this sounds like a federal issue. Maybe you need to contact your federal representative. So simultaneously, I was dealing with New York officials and federal officials. And as I was going out to Minnesota, I had printed out all these pages because I figured when I talk to people, I don't want to say, oh, I have 100 students, because that just doesn't do it justice. Because at that point, I didn't know how many students I had because I was just cut and pasting links. And so I started to print a bio, putting a picture of the student and what they were doing and what what was carried in the news. And so I'd walk into places and people were shocked to see so many students had died in study abroad, and no one knew that this issue existed. Mm-hmm. And so when I found Elizabeth in 2015, we formalized as Protect Students Abroad, because I had already been going to Washington, D.C. I had a couple of meetings at the White House in the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. I called and called, and I was surprised that the Secret Service wasn't at my door because I was calling that much. And finally, they gave me a meeting, and even they didn't know. They thought the State Department was collecting data. They thought the Education Department definitely would know about this. They didn't know what to do, and I had been going to meetings, and finally, I was told, "Hey, your parents, and to be viewed as a legit entity, you need to become a nonprofit. They don't want to see you as two crying parents." And so in 2015, we formalized as a nonprofit called Protect Students Abroad. And we do this work. It's been over 10 years. It's been, we collect the data. We have formalized the data we collected into a database, and it's the first informal database of students' death and injuries. We've published a death in database, but we haven't published the injury database, because we have to be mindful. We do not want to re-traumatize students who've come back. We think of the students who was with my son who watched what had happened. That affects your life. And no one's thinking about the after effect of what happens. You think, oh, okay, there was a drowning, we have a funeral, and life goes on, and it doesn't.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Your organization, I think, is so important because what struck me in your story is the lack of transparency that you had to deal with. So how does your organization help with that? How does PSA help parents and students get that transparency in these situations?
Well, what we do at this point is we've published our website. It was written by Elizabeth, and she'll tell you, she's a nurse midwife. She also has a writing degree, so she's a writer, and she's very steeped on the science side. And when I met Elizabeth, I was collecting data. She was reaching out to experts to find out what data had been collected. So it was a perfect match that we came together to do the work. And it's from our experiences and the experiences of other families and what we learned in the aftermath that we aim to educate and inform students and parents, and drive them to our website to read the information there, because it really does educate you on the questions you ask the programs. There's a lot of things that parents, I didn't know how when our son was looking at study abroad, it was advertised at school. We thought it was a school-run program, and it's not. So those are the kind of information that is on our website that parents could go and see, and based on that information, ask questions. And if you're uncomfortable with the question, uncomfortable with the waiver that they ask you to sign, because in my son's case, even death is not considered negligent, when it comes to a lawsuit. And even if it's a lawsuit, it wasn't about the money, it was about getting answers. And so those questions, it's very informative. If I had the information that is there, I could have asked different questions about the program. So, and the other part of that is we've been working on the federal side, on the state side, to get federal legislation passed. And in 2013, my federal congressman, Sean Patrick Maloney, introduced the first Ravi Thackurdeen Safe Student Study Abroad Act. We've had it introduced bipartisanly. For the first time, right before the epidemic, we had it introduced on the Senate side for the first time, also bipartisanly. We haven't gotten a bill passed on that side, but we are happy to say in New York State, where we've been working also, SUNY has voluntarily adopted a mechanism where they asked all the SUNY schools to upload any type of data when it comes to student deaths to their website. So they're doing it not through legislation, but they're doing it as the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's something that ZeroNow is all about, which is, it's hard to wait for them to do the right thing in Congress on the legislative side. And so when we as nonprofits take action to make the changes that we think are necessary, we realize how much power we can actually have. So what are some improvements that you have seen since forming your organization? Have you seen the transparency that you want? How has the landscape changed for you?
Well, so since we started this work, we've had 2 states adopted some form of legislation, and it was as a result of student in their state who died and the parent lobbied. So one of that state is Minnesota, and then the next one, Thomas died in Minnesota, and there's other students. There's in Virginia, they adopted a mechanism. It's not ideal. It doesn't. It can't really give us the true information we need, as we need this done on a federal level. Have a federal basic minimum standards of collection of data. So this way, all that information could come together, and then we could see true patterns, which is how we see it in the data that we have. We do see patterns of death and injuries, and some deaths or injuries might be more common in some parts of the world, and less in some parts of the world. So we know, we see patterns, and we know that parents and students. We also see repeated program offenders, and know there's no entity overlooking those third-party programs. So we've seen where a parent might sue the school after they lost their child, and what the school will say is that we are no longer doing business with the third-party program, but that third-party program will just go to another school and sign a memorandum of agreement, no question asked, and continue doing business. So we do see repeated program offenders, and it can inform parents when it comes to transparency. You could see the programs, you could see the type of incidences happening, you could have better conversation with your child, and it could inform curriculum planning and leader training on the school level. So it benefits all. And after all, we want opportunities for our children. We want them to study abroad and come back safe.
Right, of course. And
we want them to come back alive.
I would imagine that the academic community would be receptive to these efforts, but one thing that I have learned in doing these interviews is that sometimes that assumption isn't always the case with schools and administrators. So how has the response been from school districts and colleges to your efforts? Has it been a welcomed response, or have you received...
No, I can't say that it has been a welcome response. We've asked some of the colleges that we dealt with for support on the legislation. We've asked the 2 biggest lobbying organizations, Forum on Education Abroad and NAFSA, which are member organizations that the colleges belong to. And we've asked them for support on the Robbie bill, which just says collect the data and make it public for parents and students to make informed decision. That's all. Not to stop the program, and they do not want to support our bill. They do support another bill that is a growth bill to grow study abroad. And we've met with Senator Durbin, who introduced that bill, to ask him, okay, we don't have a problem with growing study abroad. Include some measures of safety that maybe schools then have to collect the data and upload it. It'll go to the education department, and it could be public, but we haven't had any luck on that end.
Why do you think that is? What is the resistance on their part of that? Is it financial? What is it?
Totally financial. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry where when when the school, when you go leave campus to study abroad, then your space on campus becomes available for an international student. And, a lot of times it's cash, and it's double the tuition. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you're going to hurt the bottom line. And they were afraid that if we publish, say, even the third-party programs that do business with the colleges, parents might see all of this and say, hey, I don't want my child studying abroad on this program, and they lose money. So it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they know they could get away because they say our law says your child's life is not worth anything because they're 18, they don't have a job, they don't have children, and they're not married. So when you value their life, it's valued at $0. So when something happens, you're never going to get an attorney who's going to accept $0. And it feels like in my case and in our case that our child just disappeared off the face of the earth. We're used to getting some sort of justice in the United States. We have a court of law that someone does something wrong. There's some kind of accountability for that, and it just feels like my son just disappeared off the face of the earth because there is no accountability when it comes to study abroad and third-party programs, and your child is over 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at ZeroNow and me doing these interviews, we think a lot about student safety, and to be fully honest, these study abroad programs isn't even something that crossed my mind, and what you're saying is shocking on so many levels. I think it's so amazing that you were able to form this organization to get this message out. What has been your proudest moment in this work where you really felt like you've made a difference and you've taken a step in the right direction?
Yeah, the moment is that I get out of bed, first of all, in the morning, because it is hard after losing a child and having no answers of what happened. But we don't do this work for our child anymore because we can't save them. But we know by sharing the information and being out there and speaking about it that it couldn't save the life of another son or daughter who's going on study abroad. It is a great experience, a wonderful experience. My son would have come back and contributed to society. He would have been a doctor today. And that's not the case because not only we lost, our country lost because you guys are our future. And so, but I have to say, I think just this past, after years of working in New York State, for them to voluntarily put a tool in place for data collection on the SUNY level was a huge, huge step. And it almost feels, even though we've been working with them for years, it almost felt easy, and somebody saw that yes, there is a need to protect our students, and that's gave me hope, and you guys give me hope because it's true. It's because of the students who speak up and who ask the questions and take your safety in your hands. The schools will stand up and finally decide to change.
Yeah, I think the only way to create change is to continue to talk about these things and to get the word out and continue to advocate for what we know is right. And that's what you guys are doing, and it's amazing. And this has been an incredible conversation. I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to hear your story. I just wanted to give you the chance to provide a message to the parents listening, to the students listening. What would you like to share with us about study abroad and how to do it safely and responsibly?
Right. So, as parents, we could tell our children to be safe, but without data and without the industry using data to inform their decision making, we're doing injustice by our children, because what do we tell them from one country to the other? What do we tell them? How do we tell them to be safe? Be safe is not it's not a blanket statement that will work in different places. We've grown, we've raised our children to be responsible people. They're going out in the world for the first time and traveling to another country that is totally different from the United States, and how we educate them prior to going is the most important thing. So I say to parents, visit our website, https protectstudentsabroad.org. Read the information there. Our contact information is there. Feel free to reach out. And if you feel uncomfortable in any of the responses that you get from the study abroad program, really have a conversation, maybe with your family lawyer or something, because you should feel safe when your child is going abroad, and safe in knowing that you made a good decision. And if the college is withholding information and the study abroad is withholding information and don't want to answer the questions up front, then that is a red flag that, hey, maybe I don't want to do business with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I remember I was considering a study abroad program when I was in college. I ultimately didn't go because of COVID. I was going to go do a journalism program in Ghana, and my parents had a lot of questions, and it was I couldn't answer them because I didn't have that level of information, and in hindsight, looking back on it, it wasn't really clear, and it was hard to get answers, and I just I can't believe that kind of escaped my mind, that like this is a huge component of school safety and campus safety. It's so important.
I have I've met people who are now parents of teenage and college students, and when they hear what happened to my son or our children and the work we've been doing, when they think back on their own study abroad experience, they're shocked at how many things could have gone wrong while they were there that they themselves didn't see as being dangerous at the moment. But it really brought them back to the work we're doing and saying, oh my God, so much could have gone wrong. So much instances there was opportunities for danger. And they came back so we could talk about it. I know my own son, in his journal, he wrote about some of the things that he was dissatisfied with, some of the things that he was going to put on his exit interview, and that's in his journal. And he voiced those to us while he was there in our conversation. And so he was already seeing things that he could have contributed back to the program, because he didn't think, there was dangers there.
And does the data support that? When you look at the data, when you look at the numbers, is it clear that there are real risks that are happening? I mean, you said at the beginning of this interview that you were able to fill out 85 pages of deaths, and that's not even touching the injuries. So clearly this is a problem that we're not talking about, and we're just trying to sweep under the rug here. And that's what
it was 85 pages of death and injuries. So some students died, some students were injured. Rape, murders, it happens in different ways. Yes, definitely. So say motor vehicle crashes are the number one for Americans abroad, not just students, but Americans on the whole. Falls is the second top way that students die. Drowning is the number 3. Drownings, there is research. You see it more in poorer countries. Falls, you might see it. Europe, the architecture might be stunningly beautiful, but they weren't designed with safety in mind. We've had students lean on railings in Europe. You know, they don't meet the same kind of codes that we have in the United States. Fires, they don't have fire alarms in some countries, fire escape. So those are the type of things that we see repeatedly, and you could see it where it happens more commonly. So yeah, the data does support the things that happens to our students in different parts of the places, and that's why we know if epidemiology studies the data, it could be beneficial for all in planning study abroad.
Well, thank you so much for illuminating this issue for us, for sharing your story, and for taking the steps to co-found this organization and get the message out. I'm so grateful and appreciative that you're part of ZeroNow and that you took the time to have this interview with me today.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you.